Hi, I'm Wayne Best, Visa's Chief Economist. In this edition, we're going to focus on affluent consumer spending. Why is it we're looking at affluent consumers? They're 20% of the population, generally defined as people over $100,000 worth of income. And yet they represent 40% of the spending overall. So understanding what the affluent is doing and doing next is going to be very important to understand the overall economic impact to this country. Since the Great Recession, the lower and middle income households were really reeling from lower wages, lost jobs, and frankly, the housing bust. The affluent were really carrying a lot of the spending in this country. Over the past 4 years, the trend has really been shifting away from the affluent and more towards the non-affluent consumer, as they've gone back to work and earning more money with higher wage growth has helped in terms of their overall spending. But the affluent has actually lagged behind that overall average. Our research indicates there's really been 3 reasons that has caused this slowdown in affluent spending. Let's look at these each a little bit more closely. One thing that makes a big influence on consumers and their spending habits is how wealthy they feel. Rising house prices and the rising stock market allows consumers to feel wealthier, and what we see is they generally spend more. If the stock market starts to regain some of its strength, or even more importantly, reduces much of the volatility that we've been seeing of late, the affluent sector will see a bounce in their spending. Consumer demographics have changed pretty fundamentally over time, and this is having a profound impact on the spending of consumers. Affluent baby boomers are actually spending less now. They peak in their spending at age 54, where the average consumer peaks at age 46. For the affluent baby boomers, as kids move out of the house and retirement planning starts to kick in, we start to see a slowdown in spending, like we're seeing right now. Now, Generation X is an important generation in terms of the impact on the affluent population, as well as the millennials. In fact, millennials have gone from 8% of the overall composition in 2010 to 16%. But they're not at their peak spending because they're not at their peak earning years yet. And we don't expect to see that until really into the next decade. Affluent spending seems to track with inflation. And this has a strong correlation, we have found, with the Consumer Price Index. When prices fall, affluent consumers actually spend a little less. Over the last few years, with prices having been in a deflationary mode in many cases, it's had a material impact on the nominal spending that the affluent consumer does. They're buying the same goods, but they're simply paying less because of deflation. What people do with the windfall from lower prices really varies. For the affluent, let's say they go out and buy a new TV and they spend $300 less on that new TV because prices have gone down. They don't go out and buy 2 TVs. They buy 1 TV and they pocket the savings generally. For the non-affluent, they are more likely to spend that windfall, and it shows up in the spending that we see in all types of goods and services. So where does that leave us today? Looking at the recent data in 2016, we see that there has been a rebound in card-based spending for the affluent. Now growing at 8.8%, it's still below the overall average and below where the non-affluent is, which is growing at around 10%. More people going back to work and earning more money is having a still profound impact on the non-affluent sector in this economy. With more and more people going back to work, wages are starting to rise, and that will start to have a spillover effect in terms of increasing prices. That inflationary aspect, which we expect to continue, albeit at a low level over the next couple of years, will have an impact on the affluent spending as we go forward. In summary, while it's safe to say that the volatility in the stock market is likely to continue, it appears that the cloud over the affluent consumer has likely lifted. The question is for how long, especially for the grain of the affluent baby boom population. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.